Welcome to the Festival of Storytellers. I thank everybody that's involved with this process because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers.
Experience is not about the publisher, it is about us, the authors.
Good afternoon. My name is David Witherington Stewart. I'm a Florida author, and I'm 85 years old and widowed. My wife died in 1999, and I have written 6 books. I'm just going to show you quickly the copies. Angel of Mortality, which is a science fiction book, and Within the Wind, which is basically an action book, and Serious Consequences, which is kind of an international intrigue. It's about international crime. And Cabrera Landing, which is a fantasy about a man who goes back in the past. And Seeking Success, which is a memoir. But may I have the PowerPoint, please? Today I'm going to talk about my book, Psychic Redemption. And in that, basically, Julie is a disembodied spirit who comes back from the dead to find her baby. And she embodies her spirit in the soul of a paramedic, Bonnie McConnell, who is the main character. And a lot of the book involves how does a disembodied spirit possess another soul without necessarily interfering with the action of that soul, but still making changes that it needs to make in order to accomplish the reason that it came back from the dead, the reason that it's coming back as a spirit. And it was a very interesting thing trying to write the book, because what is the nature of a disembodied spirit? We usually, if we're going to see a spirit, if we're going to know what a spirit is, it has to be manifested in some way. And that's what I'm going to talk about in this PowerPoint. Next slide, please. Well, we're all familiar with the body because we each have one. It's made up of organs, and it moves around, and there are all kinds of bodies. But we really don't think too much about what the person is in terms of their body. Of course, somebody like a ballerina, like it shows here, a lot of their personality is, oh, good afternoon, Bob. A lot of their personality really is in their body because of the way they move and so on like that. It conveys a great deal about who they are. Next slide, please. But the soul is a different matter. The soul is basically the heart or the nature of something. And we talk about, for example, the soul of a nation and the spirit of 76. And most of us understand how the spirit of 76 is embodied in the soul of our nation. It's in the freedom, it's in the Constitution, it's in the Bill of Rights, it's in the way that we as Americans feel about our country. So the soul is very much the heart of whatever we're talking about. Next slide, please. But the question about the spirit is there a disembodied spirit? There's a lot of question about that, and different religions have different feelings about that. In some cases, they feel like the disembodied spirit is the real thing, and that actually, when we show up in person, that's just a very temporary thing, and the spirit is eternal. Other people believe that it's basically the thought or the mind or what goes on there. So it's something that's open to a lot of interpretation, and of course, it's a good uh, it's a good subject for a novel because you really can use a lot of imagination in how you go about explaining it. Next slide, please. So, what are the manifestations of body, soul, and spirit? They all act together. But if the disembodied spirit comes back, how does it manifest itself? Next slide, please. Well, one way, of course, would be through a ghost, through an apparition, something that we can see, but that really isn't a real person. It's something that you can't touch per se, although there are different kinds of ghosts. But basically, something that shows the spirit, but it doesn't come back in the form of a real person or a real thing. It basically is just something that we all can see, we all can sense. We may not even see it, we may just sense it, but we know it's there because this spirit has come back and made itself known in some way. And that's a ghost. Next slide, please. Another way in which this disembodied spirit could come back, of course, is through possession, through basically capturing the soul and mind of a living person or a living thing. And in that way, it manifests itself. You know it's there, but it doesn't have to appear in person. It basically can appear as a part of the soul of another being, which usually would be, of course, another person in novels for the most part. Next slide, please. Another way in which a disembodied spirit can show itself is through our memory. We talk about the spirit of Abraham Lincoln. Well, of course, Abraham Lincoln isn't around anymore, but we get a certain picture in our mind when we think about the spirit of Abraham Lincoln, the freeing of the slaves, the winning of the Civil War, a person who stood for integrity. There are a lot of things that we get in the spirit of Abraham Lincoln that we put into our politics or into our mind, even though Abraham Lincoln died quite a long time ago. Next slide, please. But taken all together, the body, the spirit, the heart, the mind, they make the whole person, the whole individual. And when a disembodied spirit like Julie comes into the soul of a person like Bonnie, that person changes because now they've got a different spirit acting for them and with them. And of course, one of the things with Bonnie and Julie in the story Psychic Redemption is Julie's 16 years old. She has a lot of enthusiasm like teenagers do. Bonnie is over 30. She already had a husband. She already had a son, both of whom were killed in an automobile accident. And she's a paramedic, so her experience is much different than Julie's. She's much more cautious. She's much more mature. So it takes a long time for the two of them to work out how they're going to work together. This 16-year-old girl who has this one mission in coming back from the dead, and Bonnie who has a whole life to think about and is older. Next slide, please. So what happens is, of course, that Bonnie, as a result of Julie's possession of her, she changes. She begins to look inside of her heart and look inside of herself and understand herself better because she has this possessing spirit. Yeah, hello, Timothy. You're curious about angel immortality, so I will get back to that a little bit later. Yes, I will talk about angel immortality as well. But at any rate, Julie awakened something in Bonnie that had been missing because when her husband and her son were killed, she had retreated inside of herself. And of course, Julie brings out her younger self, her inner nature, which is a part of the arc that Bonnie follows in the story. Next slide, please. And another thing that when Bonnie starts, the way that Julie possesses her, what she does, she throws this slip of paper into into kind of a ritual fire they're having, and it says, "Show me the truth." So what sets her on her journey is that she's looking for the truth, and there is an alien, Kamishi, that helps her in finding the truth. And at the very end of the book, she realizes the truth is where infinity intersects eternity. Now, if you think about that, what does it mean? It means where you are right now and when you are right now. It means living in the present and living in the place that you're in and with what you have and your situation right at that moment. We live moment by moment. And the truth isn't necessarily found in the past or found in the future. It's found in how we got where we are right now and who we are. Hi, Kathy. Good to see you again, too. So that's the truth that Bonnie was looking for, and it comes right at the end of the book. And it's something that you have to think about because, of course, many religions are based upon what your path is and where your path is going and how you got there and how you're going to get where you're going. But it all revolves around what you're doing right now, kind of the situation with karma, for example. Okay, you can take the PowerPoint off, please. So anyway, I'll be glad to talk about any of my books. Somebody asked about Angel of Mortality. Angel of Mortality is science fiction. Uh, what do I think our soul looks like? Okay, I'll get to that in just a second. So Angel of Mortality, the thing that makes it unique is that it combines the technologies of nanotechnology and robotics and artificial intelligence and quantum computers and smart materials to make an organism that basically covers continents and fills oceans in order to bring about the regulation of climate control, reforestation, and ocean pollution. Now, what do I think the soul looks like? Oh, hi, Brianna. What do I think the soul looks like? I think the soul is the embodiment of the spirit. I believe that what we show in our soul is basically what's in our spirit. And what is in our spirit is the essence of who we are. And that essence can actually change over time or change from moment to moment. So the soul is not necessarily a constant thing, but it is always regulated by the spirit. And the spirit is basically seeking truth, seeking God in a sense. So I think the soul is the embodiment of the spirit, and it basically is affected by what our spirit is. In the case of Bonnie, when Julie finally leaves, of course, she only stays until they find out who the baby is, and they find the baby. When she leaves, Bonnie is left as kind of a renewed person, and her soul has changed because her spirit has changed, and her spirit has changed because of the influence of this other spirit. And in a sense, it's always been her inner spirit, but she has hidden it. So quite often, we don't know our own spirit until something happens to bring it to our light. It may be a catastrophe, it may be love, it may be fear, it may be any kind of emotional stimulus that shapes our spirit in such a way that it's manifested in our soul. That's kind of my belief anyway. When I followed psychic redemption within the wind, What happens also at the end of Psychic Redemption is that Julie leaves a little spark of spirit of her spirit in Bonnie. And within the wind, Bonnie is plagued by this little spark of spirit that Julie left behind. It's not supposed to be there. And it turns out that it's related to the basically the essence of the hurricane that comes in. And she has to deal with the hurricane in a way that it actually has an influence on the spirit that was left behind in her soul. And it shapes a great deal the way that she deals with the sick woman that she has to treat during the midst of the hurricane, where she's under a lot of pressure because the woman has a disease that can't be diagnosed where she is in the middle of the hurricane. And she just has to treat it generally, trying to figure out what's best for the woman that she's treating. That's what more or less makes it an action type of thing. The third book that I wrote, Serious Consequences, kind of followed from Within the Wind. The woman that Bonnie is treating, Aggie Upton, she is in a coma when the hurricane ends, and she's taken to the hospital. And her husband was in a gang in the transnational crime syndicate, and he has turned himself in. He's in jail, and because of the way they got the money, basically the federal government has frozen her assets. So she wakes up, she has no money, she has no house, she has no husband, and she is just recovering from coming out of a coma, so she has all of that to deal with. And Aggie goes through a great deal because she knows a lot about this syndicate, and she testifies at the International Criminal Court of Justice in the Hague, Netherlands. So those three books are tied together. The fourth book that I wrote, Cabrera Landing, is not tied to any of them. I just wanted to write a fantasy. And in it, this man buys a house on the Indian River, and it turns out it's a gateway to the future and the past. And he goes through that gateway, and he ends up in 17,000 BC, Florida. Well, Florida in 17,000 BC was not at all like it is today. The glacial age was in place. The water levels were much lower, and basically Florida was a totally different place. And there were a lot of animals there that are kind of mythical now, but like mammoths and dire wolves and things like that people don't even think ever existed in Florida, but they did for that period of time. And he has to deal, along with 5 other people that are also from the future, with the circumstances that they face in this place. And the house that he bought is on a place called Cabrera Landing, which was named by the pirates. And then after I got done with all that, I wrote my memoir. I wrote it primarily for my cousin, who at that time was very, very young. And I just wanted her to have a record of the things that I had done and what had gone on in my life. What will I be talking about today? Well, I've been talking about psychic redemption, talking about the relationship between the body, soul, and the spirit, and how they're related. And again, I believe that the soul is the embodiment of the spirit in the body, and that the three all work together to define who we are. So when a disembodied spirit possesses our body, it changes who we are, and it reflects in our actions. Are there any other questions, any other comments? Such a wide range of books, which is your favorite? Oh gosh. I suppose Angel of Mortality, because I spent so much more time working on it. And I think that I had learned a lot in writing the other 4 novels. And it probably just, and also I like the characters. It took me a long time to develop the characters. And I thought about doing a follow-up book to Angel of Mortality, a book I would call, well, that would be about Zvezda, who is Raisa Ilyushin's daughter, that's born right at the end of Angel of Mortality, and basically show what the world would look like 15 years later, after basically Raisa has put this Xenoborg out to the world, and it's been in operation for 15 years, because that will all change the world a great deal. And I thought the crisis that might arise, that they might face, might be the movement of the tectonic plates, which would cause, of course, a lot of volcanoes and uh, tsunamis, a lot of action in that sense. And it's something not many books have been written about singular earthquakes, but nothing's ever been written about what happens if the whole big bunch of tectonic plates out there moves. Do I think if AI truly comes about, it would have a soul? Uh, I think that if the AI had experience and had a moral compass and a set of ethics, and it took a lot of actions, I think eventually, yes, it would develop a soul. But it wouldn't be the AI itself; it would be the organism that utilized the AI. I mean, AI is just a methodology. So I think if you put all of those things together, that you can get an organism that is very lifelike and can think for itself, and that it would indeed develop a soul, and they would be different. What separates the spirit from the soul? Well, let me give an example. Uh, when we talk about, and I'll go back to the one that I mentioned earlier, when we talk about the spirit of 76, we're talking about the spirit of the American Revolution. And what defines the American Revolution? Well, of course, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, all those things kind of define what came out of the Revolution, the Federalist Papers. So that is kind of the spirit of 76. That's how it's kind of shown. But when we talk about the soul of the nation, what we mean is acting on that spirit, acting on those principles. And the soul of the nation reflects our beginning, reflects the spirit of 76, the revolution that basically got this nation started. And that's kind of how I separate them. Uh, the spirit is kind of the inner workings of the mind, of the emotions, and so on like that. And the soul is the manifestation in how the body behaves and what it does. At least that's the picture that I have. I'm sure, depending on what religion you adhere to, you'll have different ideas about what's what. How much inspiration do I take from your own life for your books? Well, actually, a great deal, because one of the biggest events in my life was that my daughter was murdered at 19 years old, and I will discuss that in the last session that I do next week. I'm doing 3 more sessions next week: Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at the same time, and I will discuss my daughter's life and her death, and that had a great effect upon how I do my books, because Julie Gustafson is very much based upon my daughter and her life. Other things that affected me, the people I've known. I think that's the whole thing. I think all the people that I've known, and I base, for example, Bonnie McConnell upon a firefighter over in Bithlow, a woman firefighter who is kind of an unusual person. I mean, she is the kind of woman that you look at her and you wonder, how could she carry a 250-pound man out of a fire? But I guarantee you she could. So, so I think the people you know affects a great deal of how you make your characters. I don't think it's just your own inner character. I think it's other people that inspire you. Very wise. Well, 85 years, you get a lot of experience. I'm not sure how wise it makes you. It doesn't necessarily give you a lot of answers. It gives you a lot of questions. And of course, I am a scientist by training. I got my degree in physics, so I don't mind getting new questions from the old questions. That's kind of the way that life progresses. So I think we're always looking for new questions. Well, you know, Psychic Redemption. That was the first book that I wrote, and I learned a lot writing that book. I had a lot of help, and one of the things, I had no idea about the structure of books. I had no idea how to make words become lyrical, to basically paint pictures with words. And I think if you're going to write novels, you have to learn how to do that. You know, your words can't just be descriptive. I had done a lot of that. I wrote proposals at one time, and and I also wrote white papers for Congress. Those are very objective and very condensed. But when you start writing novels, you begin. It's like a movie. You have to paint the picture and paint the action on the page, just like the movie portrays it on the screen, at the same time that you have the dialogue and the actors that basically take the action and make the novel work. So you can't just be writing words. You have to always have pictures in your mind. How do I get a better grasp on wordcraft? Well, number one is I get a lot of help. The first teacher that I had at Writer's Digest was basically more of a poet than she was she taught lyrical writing, and I learned an awful lot from her about how to make your words move, how to make your words come alive. You've always believed possession to be a result of a soul latching itself onto another mind. Well, the other mind is probably what I would call the spirit. So, in a sense, that's true. That's true in the case of possession. But as I pointed out earlier, there are other ways in which a spirit might manifest itself. It doesn't always have to be through the possession of a mind. It can be through the manifestation in the works or in the body or in the soul of anything. I think including a sequoia tree, including like I say, the soul of the nation. So I think the spirit is much broader than just a human mind. I think there's a spirit. I spent some time down in Peru with a shaman down in Peru, and that shaman, of course, they believe a great deal in the animal possession of the body, and that causes a lot of our ills and our good for our body. And I could see why, living in the jungle, they had to believe that, because if you don't have an animalistic soul, you're going to have a lot of trouble surviving down there. The jungle is a totally different place than living in a city or a town. So I think the spirit is something that basically guides the soul, something that allows the soul to manifest itself in action. Well, yeah, that's because you spend an awful lot of time writing a novel, and actually, a lot of your own ideas change as you get there. Uh, Particularly in Angel of Mortality, I started out just thinking about nanotechnology, and then I realized that nanotechnology is very limited unless you combine it with some of these other disciplines. So I think as you write a novel, you learn a lot about what you're trying to say, what the theme is. And I don't start out with the theme. I discover the theme as I write. I kind of discover the plot as I write, because what I start with is a character. That's the way I write. Okay, I just have seconds left, so I'm going to wrap this up. Go to my website, go to Reader's Magnet, blog me, text me, whatever you want to do. And thank you very much for watching, and good afternoon.